The whole town's batting about Cincinnati. What a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.
Hello, Reds fans. Today, Jack and I are excited to welcome Richard Fitch, a longtime author for Redleg Nation. You probably know about Redleg Nation, but it has covered the Reds daily since 2005. RedlegNation.com is how I read about the Reds, and their Twitter account claims that they are kind of obsessed. If you are a Reds fan, you'll want to follow Richard and the other authors on Redleg Nation. Richard Fitch was born in Iowa, raised in Kentucky, and he moved to New York City some 40 plus years ago to pursue an acting career. His acting career included several TV daytime soap operas and an episode or two of Law and Order. What's really interesting is he studied Shakespeare, and it has informed his writing style. Richard says, quote, "I write about baseball. I wonder what Willie Shakespeare might have written had he met Willie Mays." Richard Fitch moved back to northern Kentucky in 2021 and recently retired from his career as a tech manager for a Manhattan law firm. So Richard Fitch, welcome to We Love Our Team.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here, and yes, I love our team too. So
I'm looking at you very carefully, Richard, and trying to think like which Law and Order episode I might have seen you on.
Well, I was a dead body.
Oh.
You know how Law and Order started? That the original one always started with a murder.
Right, absolutely.
And this was episode 2, I think, or season 2, episode 14, I think. And I started the episode with my body lying face down on 10th Avenue, and a cab had just run over me. But it turned out there was a stab wound in my back, and I had been murdered and thrown off the overpass before the cab hit me.
Of course. Yeah.
Then the whole episode unfolds from there. It was actually very complicated because it's not just show up and lie down on the street. There's all the makeup that has to be done.
Sure.
They had an opening shot in the mortuary where my body's lying on the mortuary slab. That was pretty tough for my mother to watch at the time. But they had to do all the makeup on that, bruises, stab wounds, and they had to shoot all that. And then there's several episodes with my father in my father's office, and my father has pictures of me, and they had the stage of me playing tennis, playing golf, doing all kinds of things, take pictures and put them on the mantle of his office for that one scene. So there was all these costume changes I had to do. And then of course, the day of the shooting, the evening of the shooting, it was 29 degrees outside, and they gave me a wetsuit to wear underneath the suit I was wearing, a 3-piece suit, to keep me warm while I laid on the street, and they shot this thing, which took about 2 hours to shoot.
Oh my God.
So
I saw a clip the other day. I'd never seen this before. Maybe you guys had seen this, but Randy Johnson was running the bases. So I guess this is, I don't know who's, maybe the Diamondbacks, but anyway, and he came around first, and he just awkwardly fell on the ground, and he's laying on the ground. And the next day, his teammates went out and did like a chalk outline of his body between.
Yeah, that was me.
Between the bases.
Body.
Well, Richard, we've had Dr. Samarco, the coroner of Hamilton County, on the podcast. She turns out to be a huge Reds fan. Did they have a coroner there in New York City when you were lying on the street?
No.
No coroner.
No coroner.
All right. Well, you grew up in Iowa. You moved to northern Kentucky. Tell us about your Reds fandom and how you became acquainted with Redleg Nation.
Well, I wasn't born here, but I was raised here, and So I was a fan from an early age. In fact, a couple of years ago, I went to Cook Sporting Goods and had a jersey, a 1967 jersey with Veda Pinson's name on the back of it, put on it, vintage jersey. So that's where my fandom goes back to. It goes back to those days in Crosley Field, just before Crosley went away and uh, they flew home plate to Riverfront. So that's really where it started. I was a teenager then and followed the Reds ever since. Then when I moved to New York and I had my oldest child, I told him he didn't have to be a Bengals fan because I thought that was unfair at the time with the way the Bengals are so bad. But he couldn't be anything but a Reds fan. I said, "You're not allowed to be a Mets fan or a Yankee fan. I forbid that." So he agreed with that. Yeah, he's a
That is
huge.
good parenting. That is outstanding parenting. So,
Yeah,
were you a Veda Pinson fan?
yeah,
He's kind
yeah.
of an under the radar guy. We've talked about Veda on this podcast a couple of times. I mean, probably close to Hall of Fame. I don't know what his career WAR was, but just people who saw him play would say that he's right up there with some Hall of Fame guys. So
Yeah, I consider him kind of the forgotten Red, the forgotten great Red.
Yeah,
yeah,
no question
Yeah,
about that. Did you play baseball as a kid?
I played knothole baseball in Northern Kentucky.
Hmm.
I wasn't very good, but I
what
played
position?
wherever they let me play. I was the kind of kid that I sometimes played third base, but a lot of times I got shoved into the outfield. I have to admit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but Randy and I were both weak arm second basemen that we've discovered. So
yeah,
but that was fun. That was fun. What was your team? What was your not whole team?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. There were so many of them. Um, yeah, we were always sponsored by somebody different. One year we were sponsored. A guy sponsored the team himself and paid all the money, and he didn't have a lot of money. And I to this day I have tremendous respect for him. I don't remember his name, but he was poor, and he wanted to manage a team, and he took on the sponsorship himself.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, and we would he every I remember after every game he would bring a cooler full of soda pop, and that's what all of us kids looked forward to after the game. He'd be iced down, whatever orange soda or whatever you wanted, and he had it there in
Yeah.
glass bottles, and he paid for all of that. And
Oh man.
he was not a wealthy man by any stretch of the imagination. He didn't have a lot of money, but he was a big influence on me in terms of just parental, just being a great guy who just wanted to help out kids.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So did you get to many games when you were a kid? Did you get to many Reds? Were you able to go to many Reds games or?
Yeah, I went to a lot of games, especially at Riverfront. I was there all the time watching stuff. The most famous game I remember was my 18th birthday. It was 1973, and it was July 1st, and the Reds were. It was that memorable doubleheader. It was, and if I remember correctly, it was Banner Day when the fans were allowed to come on the field with the banner. Do you guys remember Banner Day?
oh
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and somebody had done this incredible banner. They'd weaved together this thing that looked like a giant radio dial in your car,
Oh
and
wow.
they'd weave this thing together, and it was huge. It was very wide, and it was unbelievable. And of course, this was before we had all this graphics, software programs, and it was beautiful. And I remember that game because that was the
How King.
Hal King walk off.
Wow.
And they were
I
10 and a half games
oh
behind, I think.
Jack,
It's-
weren't you in that banner day parade?
well, I was, and I had like a handwritten crappy banner. I just wanted to get on the field. I thought it was so cool to be able to walk on the AstroTurf. But Richard, we had Jim Borgman was one of our guests, and he came in second place that year in Banner Day, and he told the exact same story that it was that day that Hal King hit the home run that turned that season around. It was just amazing. I vaguely remember. I think I was sitting on the front porch of my house in Cheviot with my dad, listening to that game, and just very downcrest because it just looked like the Reds were going to drop another game to the Dodgers, and then all of a sudden, I mean, it's hard to convey, what that meant and how it just changed the trajectory of the whole season. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was a magical day, and if I remember correctly, we didn't leave the ballpark the games, back then. And then Tony Perez won the second game, and I think he won that in like the 9th or 10th inning where he got a base hit or something, and they sweat and they won both ends.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Borgman said he was sort of down in the bowels waiting to carry his banner on the field, and he heard this big cheer, and that's what it turned. It would turn out to be the Hal King home run. So I think it might have even been a grand slam if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, just unbelievable.
Hey, Richard, when you were in New York City, I suppose you still follow the Reds. Did you get to many games when the Reds would visit New York?
Oh, when they were there, I was there at Shea and then later City. And my son would go with me. I mean, those were he had 2 opportunities to see the Reds. We'd drive down here in the summer. So we'd drive the 650 miles down from New York to Cincinnati and stay with my mother for 10 days or so. And we'd go to as many Reds games as we could. And the only other opportunity he had to see them was at Shea or City. And so we would do that together religiously. We were there all the time. I remember once he was about 7 or 8 years old, and we were at Shea, I think, and we were around the visitors' dugout, and they were taking batting practice or infield practice, and the guys were coming off the field, and all these little boys. There was one little boy next to us. He had a Skyline Chili T-shirt on, in New York, and we thought that was pretty cool. And so all the guys were running off the field, and our then third baseman, trying to remember his name. Oh gosh.
Sabo?
Huh?
Sabo?
No, third baseman.
Ray Knight.
No, after Ray Knight. Oh boy, I hate when I do this. Anyway, he was coming off the field, and the kids were handing him their Sharpies to sign something, hats and balls and stuff. And he said, "Sorry, boys, I got to go take a poop." He didn't want to sign, so he ducked into the dugout with us saying that. So from then on, whenever a player and then he got traded to San Diego right after, not too long after that. And so I remember texting my son and saying, so-and-so is pooping in San Diego now.
Is pooping in San Diego now.
That became our name. That became the way we talked about trades. If somebody got traded, well, he's like, he's pooping in San Francisco or wherever.
That's great.
He's gone now. So that was a pretty funny story. We used to go all the time. And whenever we could see him.
Did you have any? What are your favorite trades of all time for the Reds?
Oh, I think everybody's favorite trade is the Joe Morgan trade. That turned the whole franchise around. There was, there's nothing.
How did you feel when that trade was announced? Because I will tell you, I was disappointed. I was sad. I really liked Lee May, and I didn't really know who Joe Morgan was. So
I don't think any of us really knew who Joe Morgan was, and he didn't have a great career, the same career, obviously, with Houston that he had with us. But he apparently didn't get along with them. What was it, Harry the Hat Walker? He didn't get along. Yeah. He didn't get along with him at all. And so I have a feeling he didn't get as much of an opportunity there. But, I don't think anybody was happy to see Lee May leave.
No.
Yeah. It's funny how things work out, though.
It is.
How about more recent trades that you really thought were either good or bad?
Well, the Moustakas trade I was disappointed in because I thought Moustakas could be valuable to the Reds if they'd signed him to 2 years, but signing him to 4 years at his age just seemed like a loser. You just knew that wasn't going to end well. And in fact, it didn't even start off that well. So that was tough. The Johnny Cueto trade, I'm sure they tried to re-sign Cueto, but Cueto wanted market money. He's kind of doing what Chase is doing now at the Bengals. He wants the same money other wide receivers are getting paid, And at the time, there was a Chicago starter who had gotten a big $160 million contract, and he wanted that money. And I don't think the Reds wanted to pay it, and so they ended up signing Homer instead. But the three guys they got for him, I was sure that Cody Reed was going to be a star for the Reds.
Finnegan had some success for the Royals, too. He pitched well in the one World Series. And I mean, I talked to a guy, I can't think of his name, but he was a scout, but he said Lamb was a loser for the start. That was just kind of a throw-in part of that deal. But the other two guys, I think there was reason to be a little optimistic on that. But
and none of them.
I don't know how things are going to work out, do you?
Yeah, I was in the community fund office that room they have where they sell all the memorabilia, and there was a big basket of balls that they're trying to sell, and they're all ex-players. They're selling them for like $20 a piece. And I found a Cody Reed ball, and I had to buy it because it's like what could have been,
What could have been. Yeah, but trades work out. I mean, who would have thought that George Foster, Frank Duffy for George Foster,
Right.
Who would have thought that Foster was going to be the monster that he turned out to be? So things work out sometimes.
How did you get involved with Redleg Nation?
Well, I was just sort of looking. I had always enjoyed writing in college, but it always took a back seat to the acting. And then at a certain point around 2009, 2010, I was interested in trying to find a place to write. And then Chad Dotson put out the call and said he was looking for writers. So I sent him a couple of samples of things I'd written, and he signed me up. He was gracious enough to sign me up, and I wrote for him for 3 or 4 years, and then I went away and wrote for a startup called The Cauldron, which was a startup that wrote under the Sports Illustrated banner. I wrote a bunch of pieces for them, and then under some mysterious circumstances, The Cauldron folded. There was some sort of mishigas with investors and stuff, and Sports Illustrated sort of killed it. And then I went back to Redleg Nation a while later for Chad, and then Chad sold the business to Doug Gray, who was writing, who had his own site, Reds Minor Leagues, and he's the local expert on the minor leagues. So I started writing again for him. And I've been doing that since, I think, around 2018 or 19.
Do you have any formal journalism training or education?
No.
Just picked it up?
I have in another room, I have 10 monkeys that bang on typewriters, and eventually something comes out that I can hit the publish button on. No, I don't actually. As we were talking about earlier, I'm a very slow writer, because I'm more interested in my writing style than I am my opinion. Because everybody has an opinion, who cares? And you can go on Twitter and everybody's telling you what the Reds should do or shouldn't do. And I'm going to write an article about what the Reds should do this week, and that'll be fun. But I'm more interested in the writing style and making it an enjoyable read than I am people agreeing with me, because nobody agrees with anybody nowadays.
Nah. You know Jamie Ramsey?
I have met Jamie Ramsey. He got me a Redleg Nation interview with a guy that did a video on the Reds years ago. So okay. Yeah, I know him.
No, I didn't know if you knew him well. I was going to ask you to ask him why he doesn't put up the Scoreboard Stumper on Twitter anymore. It's been very disappointing. I used to love that. My boys and I would every night send around the Scoreboard Stumper and see if we could get it, but for some reason he doesn't do it anymore. So
okay,
I'll have to find it through another source, I think, and grill it.
Well, I'll get on Twitter. I'll find him and I'll ask him, see if I can get an answer out of him.
I miss it. Tell him he's got at least 3 people who really miss it. We enjoy that.
When I'm at the ballpark, because I have like a half a season ticket to the games, and so I go to about 40 games a year, and I see it up there, and I'm always disappointed at how poorly I do at the Scoreboard Stumper.
Well, I mean, one of the tricks is it depends on who they're playing, because inevitably one of the answers involves somebody from the other, or frequently involves somebody from the other team. So that's one
Yeah,
little cheat code, that we
yeah,
got, right?
but that's all I can get.
So do you get press privileges?
No, they do not give, to my knowledge, they don't give any blogs press privileges. I know Chad was trying to do it when he owned Redleg Nation and was unsuccessful. I know that Doug has tried once back in 2019, but I don't know whether they don't have a great relationship with Rob Butcher or whoever's making that decision, or whether it just is it might just be a general sort of consensus among ownership and front office management that they don't want to give blogs access to the team. It's disappointing to me because, we were talking, I often get criticized for defending the front office and defending the manager too much. And I think, and my take on that has always been, I'm happy to criticize the manager if I know the reasons why the manager did something. But when I can't, if I as a writer don't have access to what's going on behind the scenes, what in the world can I say? I mean, if he doesn't bring on a Sunday, if he doesn't bring Tyler Stevenson off the bench to pinch hit when clearly he should have been out there, why is that happening? And it's hard for me to criticize because I don't know what's going on. I mean, I don't know whether the guy said, I can't play today, I'm not feeling well, or something else is going on, or there's some personal thing going on that I don't know about. So I'm hesitant to criticize things that I just don't have access to. And that's one of the things about not having any press credentials is we don't know a lot. So we're guessing a lot of the time.
Yeah, you're not a daily columnist like Paul Doherty. You do take your time. What, Richard, you appear, once a week? It seems like it's once a week or every 2 weeks.
Well, it's supposed to be once a week, and it's not and that's my fault. That's because I'm a slow writer. And a lot of times I don't like what I've written, and I won't hit the publish button, and I'll say, I've got to rewrite this. So I'll do it next week. And to Doug Gray's credit, he's very understanding about that. He doesn't say, where the heck is the piece you were supposed to write this week? He lets me write at my own pace. I'm trying to get better about that and getting more disciplined, but some of that is a skill-based thing that perhaps I don't have. I think, I don't know how, like I said, I don't know how Paul Doherty does what he does. Churning that stuff out, and it's quality writing. Whether you agree with him or not about what he says, and a lot of people don't, that's quality writing every morning. It was when he was writing for TML, the Morning Line, and I assume although I haven't checked it out lately, I assume it is on his blog. It's just, It's really good stuff and worth a read. It's kind of stuff that you hope that whether you agree with it or not, you think, well, I'm glad I read that this morning. It was a pleasurable read, entertaining.
Well, I think Will Shakespeare took some time when he was writing his material, so I don't think we should criticize you too much, Richard. He took years sometimes to write something.
Yeah, well,
as I recall.
He might have been a step or two above me in that regard. But yeah. And then there's some people that say he didn't write all that stuff either too.
Yeah, right.
So
who decides what do you have pretty much autonomy in terms of what you write about, or does Doug sort of give you assignments, or?
No, he lets me write anything I want to write about.
Okay.
And that's the great thing. I mean, I literally just, it's whatever I feel it's important that I want to say. So yeah, complete autonomy. He doesn't agree with some of the stuff I write, I know, but he leaves me alone. He leaves all of us alone, as far as I know. Yeah.
If somebody was wanting to look at your greatest hits, are there any memorable articles that you really thought got some traction or were really viewed favorably by others?
Well, the article that got the most traction was I wrote in 2012, and it was an article about Joey Votto entitled "When Great Isn't Good Enough," and it surrounded a lot of the criticism Votto got for his approach at the plate. And I remember I was coming home from work, and I was living in New Jersey at the time, and I was on the bus, and a friend of mine who was writing for Redleg Nation, who's now writing for Chatterbox Sports, he had he texted he sent out a tweet that said, "Oh my God, Richard, the Paz mentioned you." The Paz being Joe Posnanski. So I went on Joe Posnanski's blog, and sure enough, Joe Posnanski referenced what I'd written a few days earlier. And then shortly after that happened, I got a mention on the NBC Sports webpage. And then right after that, Dave Schoenfeld over at ESPN.com wrote a whole article, listed my name and quotes from the article. And then the MLB Network said they wanted to talk to me. So I spent a good 5 or 6 minutes on their morning show, which was Hot Stove, I think, at the time. They had a daily morning show on the MLB Network. So I got to talk to Matt Vasgersian, if I'm pronouncing that right, and forget the other guy's name, but Billy Ripken.
Oh.
Okay. So the two of them, I talked to them about the article. And so that's the one that sort of blew up. So I had my 15 minutes of fame there.
So I didn't read that article. And so what was your take in the article? What was the take?
Well, just that his hitting style is misunderstood, and people didn't really appreciate his approach. And that they did. And I started the article off by saying, they did the same thing, 60, 70 years ago to Ted Williams.
Right.
Ted Williams came out and they booed him because of his approach at the plate. And I remember Updike wrote about him, when he had his last at bat, he didn't come out for they were cheering for him to come out of the dugout, and he wouldn't.
Right.
And they said, Updike said, gods don't answer letters.
We talked about Doc a little bit. Are there other columnists that you admire?
Well, I always loved Jim Murray out in L.A. He was alive. He wrote some brilliant stuff. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a guy who just it didn't matter what he was writing about. You just wanted to read it. And the same is true of Joe Posnanski. I mean, I'll write anything Joe wants to write about. It doesn't have to be about baseball. It doesn't even have to be about sports. He wrote a wonderful article that went viral. It's incredibly famous now, about his daughter going to Disney World and going to Harry Potter World, and her having difficulty choosing a gift that they were going to buy her something, and she couldn't. And this teenager who was working there helped her and basically saved the day. And it's like you read that piece, it'll bring tears to your eyes. Anything Joe Posnanski writes is worth reading, and I've been buying his books lately. He's got Why We Love Baseball. I don't know if you guys have read that.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah. He's coming out with Why We Love Football.
Is that right? I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, that's on the verge of coming out.
So, Richard, did you make more money acting or as a writer?
Neither. I think the best I did in acting was, I think I made maybe $10,000 one year or something.
Yeah.
It was tough.
I'll tell you what, getting back to Jim Murray, he did not have great things to say about Cincinnati. Did you ever hear any of his quotes about Cincinnati?
No.
He said one time, it looks like it's in the midst of condemnation proceedings. If it was human, they'd bury it. They said, the guys were kidding on the bus coming to Cincinnati one time. They decided if war came, the Russians would bypass the city because they think it had already been bombed and taken.
Okay, now I'm going to have to revise my thoughts on Jim Murray.
He was also
great. Murray was really funny. He just the quips and the one-liners seemed to be kind of endless.
Yeah, I loved him when I was in high school and college, but I do remember he was a big fan of the owners back in all the collective bargaining struggles. He was always defending the owners, I thought, and that he thought that the players were just greedy, and all that stuff. So I don't know. He was a great writer, though.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
Who was that guy? There's a guy in New York who was pretty well known. Young. I can't think of his
Dick
first
Young.
name. Jim Young, right? Was it Jim?
Dick Young.
Dick.
He was really in the owner's pocket too. I mean, he gave the players a pretty hard time. But
Yeah, he wasn't a favorite of mine, and I think a lot of people today don't look back on Dick Young as one of the
Dick Young. Yeah,
but he was prolific and he was popular. I don't know why.
Okay,
Right.
that's our signal for some word association, Richard.
Okay.
So let's start with analytics.
I love it. I love analytics. I'm not an old school guy, even though I'm old. I love analytics. I'm a big fan. And whether you like it or not, that's the way the game has gone. So you better get on that train because every team is using them.
You look at fan graphs a lot.
Oh yeah, fan graphs, baseball reference, yeah, all of it.
I applaud. I really applaud you for that because there are some older guys that are just so dismissive of it, and it drives me nuts. It's one of the reasons I like Chris Welsh because he's adopted it and appreciates it. So
Yeah, I had just written the last article I wrote was on the eye test and how it lies to us.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of anger out there about the way that Reds run the bases. And I looked up how the Reds run the bases, and they're ranked number 1 in baseball in running the bases. Because the metrics they use don't just focus on whether the steal attempt was successful or not. It's like, did you stay out of double plays? What else happened in that game? And how did the other teams do the same thing? And so it's all measured against the rest of the teams in the league and who does it best in a comparative way. And it turns out the Reds are number 1 in baseball in base runs. So even though they make dumb mistakes, get picked off, and they're over aggressive, it works for them. And mostly it works for them because they can't hit. They get a guy on first base and they can't string together 3 hits to get a guy home. So they have no other choice but to push the envelope. And a lot of people just, when the other day I was at the ballpark and I watched Jonathan Indy get picked off first base or second base, and it's just like, you could just hear the crowd go, "Are you kidding me? I mean, not again." It's like, but
how about Bob Castellini, Richard?
Disappointing. When Bob Castellini came on the scene and he made that promise to bring a championship back to Cincinnati, I didn't think that would be fair to hold him to that. Championships are hard to come by. But and when he signed Votto and then turned around and gave $75 million to Brandon Phillips, you thought, okay, this is a guy who wants to win. And then at a certain point, all that collapsed. And I remember Doherty writing a column about how Castellini said, we go into the meeting room and we talk, and if we don't come to a consensus, I make the decision. So you got a sense that the ownership was meddling a lot. And that disappointed me because my feeling about ownership is they should put up the money. They should say, here's how much money you have to spend. They should get out of the way and let the people that they hire make the baseball decisions. Because while Castellini made his millions in produce, that doesn't make him, a guy who should be running a baseball team. If you don't like what the front office is doing, spend money and hire somebody, a good general manager that you trust, and then give them the team and say, I thought that's what was happening with Dick Williams. It seemed like there was a turn. We got more analytical. Money was being spent at the lower levels in development, and everything seemed to be going in the right direction. And then all of a sudden, Dick Williams up and quit.
Yeah.
And it just
Nick Kroll. On that subject, let's throw out there Nick Kroll.
I don't know how to I think Nick Kroll has done really good with what he's been given. I don't know how you evaluate Nick Kroll if you don't let him spend money. If you're only going to let him spend a little bit of money, then you get the trades you had last winter. And that's not going to get it done. I mean, they have $104 million payroll this year. That's just not, you can't expect to compete with that. I mean, I don't expect them to spend Dodger money. or New York Yankee money. That's never going to happen, and forget about that. But if the Reds can't spend $160, $170 million to put a team on the field in terms of payroll, then well, what are we doing here? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like the Guardians model. I mean, I feel like they've done exactly what I mean, they get criticized a lot in Cleveland for not spending enough money, but I definitely think the ownership stays out of the way and lets their baseball people do their job. And they're competitive. For the most part, they're competitive every year, So.
Yeah, the Indians are interesting. I think the Indians are farther along in their development than we are, because they're not spending a lot of money either, but they seem to have a lot deeper bench to pull from. And the Reds just didn't have anybody after that first wave came up last year. There's nobody behind them at Louisville. So when these guys got hurt, and when Marte got suspended, they didn't really have anybody to take their place reliably. And until they do that, it's going to be more of the same. But even if they get 3 or 4 position guys that they can develop, that they can count on, they're still going to have to spend money to fill holes. You can't win with your farm system alone.
Right.
I mean, Tampa Bay tries that, and it works to a certain degree, but I'm not sure that that's a model that you want to pursue, whole hog. You got to do a little bit of both. You got to spend some money. I mean, that's baseball today.
Would you
How about the
give
2012 playoffs?
The 2012 playoffs. Well, it broke my heart when Johnny Cueto walked off the mound.
Yeah.
With that injury 6 pitches in, because the moment that happened, I said, okay, there goes the World Series. But I didn't think we'd lose that series. And it was really remarkable how Sam LeCure came in and saved the day for about 2 or 3 innings until Latos could get loose and finish the game. And then the game there was game 2 in San Francisco that who pitched that game? Arroyo came in and pitched a brilliant game.
Mm-hmm.
But he came in and pitched one of the great games of his career, and they come home 2 up, and then fell apart. And I was really critical of Dusty Baker for that, because I thought Dusty Baker was way too passive in that series. He sat on his hands. I had actually written an article called 14 Minutes, and it was 14 minutes from the moment I started watching on TV, Matt Latos starting to melt down on the mound. And you could see it. He was losing control, and the umpire, he was barking at the umpire, and the umpire actually came out one point, pointed a finger at him, said, watch your mouth, and went back behind the plate, and he just was throwing wildly all over the place, pass balls, base hits, and Baker didn't come out until it was too late. That grand slam, just like, it's like, oh my God. So I've been watching for almost 15 minutes. This thing goes sad. They were even talking about it on TV. NBC was like, the announcers were saying, Latos looks like he's coming. He's got a habit of, coming unglued, and looks like it's happening again. Boy, that was tough to watch.
That was tough to watch. I remember game 3 when Brandon went for that extra base and he got nailed by Posey. It was early in the game, but it just gave me a queasy feeling. I was kind of like, I don't like this.
Yeah, it's just that some people can't even talk about it to this day in Cincinnati. I know. It's just like, it's too painful, because that was their year. They were good that year. But that was also the year that Joey slid into third base in San Francisco, hurt his knee, and he was out for, I don't know, weeks and weeks. And even when he came back, he wasn't the same power hitter. He couldn't hit for the same power. But still, even so, they had the pitching that year.
Yeah, they did.
How about Walt Jocketty?
Oh, I was one of the Walt Jocketty defenders, because, again, you don't know. There's more than one ways to win, even though Walt was old school, and I didn't particularly care for that. He had a great career, and I thought him and ownership were together on the way they wanted to do it. And he brought in, he made some good trade. Well, that Latos trade was a great trade when it happened. It made a big difference in that season. He got a number 2 starter for 3 or 4 players that weren't really needed by the Reds. They could afford to give up. None of those players turned into stars. Although the catcher
Grandal's had a pretty good career.
Grandal's had a pretty good career, but
Mesoraco. I mean, it was like that was. I mean, I think the Roland trade was a great trade. I think they needed a guy like Roland. I think that was. I wish they could. I don't know who's out there coming for next year, but I think this team could use a Greg Vaughn, Scott Rowland kind of guy. I mean, just that presence would help this team immensely, I think.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, that was the old "need you on third, Brucey" thing that Rowland had said. You guys got to take the extra base. You got to, can't be satisfied just to get to second base. You got to go and get to third. And, yeah, he was a great pickup, and I had actually done. I had gotten who's the guy that wrote I wrote a book about wasn't Jaws, it was a analytical system about predicting the Hall of Famers, and he geez, if you got a second, I'm going to get the book because I get to write.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll tell you what, Jack, Redleg Nation is really good to read.
Yeah, no, I have seen it. I had not seen that 2012 thing. But yeah.
I always like it when a guest is willing to get up from his seat and actually do something. Go find a book.
We go the extra mile on this podcast, I tell you.
So this is it, the Cooperstown Casebook, written by Jay Jaffe.
Okay.
I believe Jaffe writes for Fangraphs as well, but he wrote this book, and I had a meetup with him, and we had dinner together, and I talked about Scott Rowland, and he was in agreement that Scott Rowland belonged in the Hall of Fame, and he wrote this in his book. To Richard, we'll get Scott Rowland into the Hall someday. Thanks for your support, Jay Jaffe. So he was a big one, and of course, I have this book as well.
That's fantastic. Oh yeah.
Oh, there you go. That you can't top that. That's.
Well, everybody needs a New York Times bestseller on their shelf.
Yeah.
No question.
Well, and then Rowland gave that great induction speech, so it was a win-win for everybody involved.
Yeah.
How about the 1990 Reds? What do you think when you think of the 1990 Reds?
Boy, for me, it was just. See, I grew up with the Big Red Machine, so the 90 thing was just like icing on the cake. For me, I didn't expect it, and in fact, I got off to that great start, and then they only played 500 ball the rest of the year.
Yeah,
and then, but what I loved about it was I never got over Gene Tennis beating the Reds in '72. Those journeyman catcher hits 4 or 5 home runs.
Right.
Yeah,
I never got over that. I never got over watching the owner dancing on the dugout. Cincinnati dugout with his wife at the end of Game 7. I always hated the A's after that. When we swept them, that to me was 18 years of payback in the waiting.
Gene Tennis actually got death threats during the 1972 World Series. He needed security around him, like going from the hotel to the riverfront for Game 6 and 7.
Wow.
Huh. That's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, let's finish this up by something really significant. We're going to say Richard Fitch, Skyline or Gold Star?
Dixie.
Dixie. There you go. Now there's a true Northern Kentucky guy.
That is a true Northern Kentucky. And you know that when somebody told me when Newport was the Sin City, and then a lot of it moved to Las Vegas, and a lot of Newport people moved to Las Vegas. And Dixie chili, that's when they started canning chili so they could ship it out to Las Vegas because all the Newport people needed their Dixie chili.
Wow. I did not know that.
Jack, are you a big Empress chili fan, being from the West Side?
Me? I didn't eat chili much when I don't know, for our family just wasn't big. We were big pizza people. We were big La Rosa people, but I didn't start eating Skyline until I got a little older, and I'm a Skyline guy. So. Yeah.
Okay. I'm kind of a Gold Star guy.
There you go.
There you go.
My second child, she's a gold star person.
Richard,
All
do
right.
you think we'll see a world championship in our lifetime?
I hope so. I mean, it really just comes down to whether the ownership either sells the team to somebody who wants to spend a fair amount of money to compete in the marketplace, or if they change their philosophy and start spending some more money themselves. Because, again, I just think you can only build so much through the farm. You can't build it all. They've done really remarkable job building the pitching, and I understand why they won't go out and buy pitching, because it's too expensive. It's the most expensive thing to buy, so you better build that in house. But if they get three guys that can play the infield well, they're going to have to supplement that with spending. You can't. Nobody has a farm deep enough for that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Hey, Richard, this has been a lot of fun. I am so glad that we had a chance encounter out in center field at a ball game. Ran into you. I don't know if you were slugging down a beer. We were slugging down some beers, and I figured out who you were, and you were gracious enough to come on the podcast. So we very much appreciate it, and we will tell our listeners you got to read the Redleg Nation, particularly on Thursdays.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm gonna try to write a little more so that people can actually find me on Thursday. Shout out to my brother Scott, who I think first talked to you and let me know that you were interested, and I'm glad he did, because this has been very enjoyable, and you guys have been great. And
Great. Well, I'm gonna go see if I can track down that season 2 of Law and Order. So
the episode is called Silence.
Silence. Okay, I'll find it. We'll go on Peacock. I'll go on Peacock and find it.
Yeah, it's there somewhere.
And you had no speaking parts in Silence.
No, I know, nothing. So, yeah, it's it'll be over quick for you. You don't have to watch the whole hour.
Right,
yeah, just the intro.
That's right.
Thanks, Richard. It was great.
Much.
We really enjoyed.
We got that iron curtain back there. Okay, I'm going to open up the curtain. Okay, fan.
There we go.
Another standing ovation, Richard. It's incredible. One of the great Shakespearean authors of our day.
I'm not worthy.
The whole town's batting about Cincinnati. What a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.